Hello everyone, it's Sean. Here's another typography video. I looked back at the original one that I did some time ago, and it was pretty basic, and a lot of people have seen that video. I'm actually really surprised at how high that number is, and I really appreciate everybody checking out my channel. And I also want to say that I picked up a condenser mic today to improve the audio. And the guys at Best Buy downtown in Toronto were responsible for helping me out. And if those two guys at the counter do indeed show up at my channel and you guys are watching this this video, hello, and thanks for the mic. It works great. It was good chatting with you guys, and hope you're having fun. So anyway, on with the video. So how typography impacts design. This is intermediate to advanced typographic ideas. Now, there's lots of graphic designers out there that might argue that none of this typography is intermediate or advanced. But I'm going to argue that the ideas are intermediate to advanced. So how typography impacts design? Well, one way that it impacts design is communication. I've thrown in this red question mark just to indicate that the same thing said two ways is communication. So typography, the use of color might emphasize a question or something like that. It enhances communication. Typography used a certain way and used in different ways can persuade your reader or the person who's looking at your ad or layout to think the way you want them to think. So persuasion being, for example, I can ask this question, how typography impacts design. And using the design of the type, I can emphasize that question. I can point out that I'm really saying how typography becomes the subject in this sentence, how typography impacts design. And without changing much, I can say how typography impacts design, which is ironically what this video is about. So how it impacts it depends on how you use it. So it isn't just about the font you choose. It isn't just about the arrangement of type. This arrangement is random. It has nothing to do with the message that you're seeing. But because I've highlighted a certain word, you kind of get that I mean for you to look at that. So you can begin thinking in your typographic arrangements and designs, what do you want people to come away with that may not be so obvious with everything being equal? So type can be flexible that way to sort of help you out. Type obviously also impacts tone and manner. So the choice of fonts, the choice of arrangements, they obviously have some kind of an effect. Now, this is a more visual effect. So do I like that script font? Do I like the fat and thin font combinations? There's really no color here influencing that, but that would come into it as well. I actually quite like this typographic approach, which is sort of why I did this. This is one of my favorite kinds of typography, just using it as graphic shapes. It's not even about the words or how you read them. It's just what looks really cool and what can you do with the size of letters versus this, which is now about how do those words and letters dance across the screen? How do you want them to unfold? So typography can play that kind of a part. Font changes obviously will have an effect. So a font choice can change the message. When it's done in the top font, which is just for discussion, that's Arno Pro, and beneath we have Arial Black. The top font is sort of a classic reading font. You might find this in books more so than other places in graphic design, where the bottom one is obviously like a headline kind of a font. That's a big, bold bang. It's just right there, and that has a different tone, a different feeling. So the choice of font with the same message, the point is, can make a difference. I also wanted to point out that sometimes in relationship with images, in this case, a simple image like a box, you can see that, this very cool box, exclamation point. What does that font have to do with that box? Well, the font is set in sort of a square shape. That's one argument I can make for what these things have to do with each other. The second example, now each letter that you look at is fatter in itself. It's more boxy. Each letter individually. Then when you put it all together, there's obviously more black space than white space. There's very few curves at the edges of some of the letters. And you could square those off if you wanted to put a little time against it. So you can see that I could possibly take typography and deliver on my image so that the type itself looks like big fat boxes to match the box. Now more so, when you look at this, you can now really see the rounded edges. You may prefer this. I'm not saying that these two things are a design competition. You need to like one or the other. But the point is that this one, round, open, lots of white space versus the black box, maybe not quite as connected as this one. That what's on your page, never as simple as a box and seldom as simple as 3 words. However, those connections can be made if you become aware of them. You start thinking about type delivering on what your page looks like, the elements that are there. So I wanted to show how images can play with type, and it can deliver higher level design if you look for opportunities. Okay, now granted, everything you're going to see after this, there's no body copy. I don't have rules and regulations to follow. I don't have a style guide which is limiting my thinking. All that kind of stuff can happen. I'm a big fan, however, of going for something big and then working back as I need to. Sometimes you have to work back so far you lose your idea. That's just something you'll encounter on a design by design basis. But type can be playful, and I've found the opportunity with the way that her legs were positioned that they sort of took the place of the A. And her position was playful, so I could use the message playful. The type itself is not fat, it's not heavy. It's this nice white type, white like her outfit. So it's really helping her to stand out, but it's also delivering on the mood of the image. So, and the fact that playful works literally with her body is also kind of an interesting angle to this. It adds something to it. So start looking for opportunities in your images where you can see something that you can actually pull out and have some fun with. It's not always there. These things are rare, but when they are there, they're very awesome. In this case, I didn't plan these photos, by the way. These photos were done, I think, 2 years ago, and I just asked if I could use them, and as I went through them, I found this image of her, and it seemed like very much like an ampersand, and that her body position was like an ampersand. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters in a couple of ways. I looked at this and thought, well, what is she doing? She's doing, I don't think it's specifically yoga, but I know that this is a stretch. It has something to do with wellness. So the term health and wellness, if I think of the ampersand and I decide maybe she's the ampersand, you can see that you could take something like an image which is delivering on the idea of health and wellness. You know the term health and wellness. You get the idea. So essentially, I saw the opportunity to turn her into an icon, which actually helps the type. So now the type isn't doing the work, she is, but she's becoming a bit of type. Now, this is a really rare opportunity, but if you are thinking this way, as soon as I looked at her, that's the shape I saw, and I realized there was an opportunity to use that. And so maybe down the road, you can actually customize an image to match your typographic message if you know it's coming and if you know what to do with it. I wanted to show that type and the choices of fonts and where things are and how they're treated. These are compound variables. It's not just one thing. It's not just about picking the right font. I could pick the right font, but that doesn't mean that it should necessarily go anywhere. And I have to make that decision, and I have to make connections. The word emotion and then is and subtle, the sentence itself becomes more subtle towards the end. The tracking opens up so the words aren't so close together, and that delivers on her expression. So emotion is subtle. So the type becomes subtle, and it delivers that. The font as well is a delicate font. It's not a headline font. It's not heavy. It's not a display font. It is delivering what the copy is saying, which is delivering what she is giving you. Now, that photo is not particularly emotional, but because I see this photo and I want the message to be about emotion, I can make it about that simply by treating the typography with the image together in a way that all things are trying to deliver the idea of emotion as subtle on a concept level. And by contrast, other times, well, not so much. So this was another great photograph in the series, and I thought, change the font up. Now it's more of a display font. Why display? Well, simply because she has attitude now. This is no longer about emotion. This is about attitude. And the attitude is obvious. So this isn't going to be a sort of conventional book font. It's not going to necessarily withstand a huge heavy font because there's something subtle happening here. The subtlety is in her expression and obviously in her middle finger. So this one was actually a trickier choice in type. And you may not like my choice. I'm not saying that this is the ultimate design solution and font together with image, perfectly matched. But the idea here, for me anyway, is if I'm dealing with something that has more attitude, that's going to affect my font decision. And my font decision will help deliver what's happening in the image. So I wanted to show how fonts can actually work against something. So for example, you may like this font. I don't mind it, I've used it. But what's she doing? Well, she's in a room, it's a white room, she's wearing white, and she has this breathy look about her. So a breath of fresh air is something that this image easily delivers on, but that type isn't delivering on it. Not only is it black, and I realize that I could have changed the color to maybe try and make it go further, but I wanted to make this point that essentially this font really isn't getting this job done. You could argue you like the font, and you could argue that this design was pleasant. But that's sort of not, I think, the optimal way to go. So taking the same thing, and now using a font which is really, really delicate, and choosing a color which kind of works with the idea of fresh air. I don't know why blue makes me think of fresh air. Of course, there's a blue sky, but the idea of this color seems fresh as well. You understand what I'm getting at. So the font is much lighter. I've opened the tracking way up. And of course, I've followed her body line and tried to make something out of that. So this kind of helps more than this. Again, is this the perfect design? Of course not. I don't have real stuff to deal with. I'm just giving you some concepts. But you can see the difference. Of course, this delivers better. And it's pretty easy to see that. So this one, this is more subtle. And of course, these kinds of opportunities are not always there. But there's a movement that her body has. And she's doing something, and her expression is sort of a playful one. And just kind of that circular motion in her movement. So sexy is simple when you know how. So I can use those words to persuade you that, she is in fact sexy, and she knows how to be sexy. And this wonderful, oh, this must be a candid image of her, just she looks this perfect all the time. Of course, we know that's not true. As the designers, we see the photo shoot, and we see that it took 10 shots to get this one. But we know that this one shot delivers that idea. So it just looks very casual, and we can basically use the typography. Again, the font now is a thinner font. Not that thin is important, but in this case, sexy doesn't come off to me as big chunky type. This is much more so. And the curved type is following the direction of her spin. But you get the idea that there's an image here which is delivering, it isn't necessarily delivering sexy. This wasn't shot to say, hey, let's make a sexy shot. But this is me and potentially you taking an image and a concept and an idea you want to deliver and finding a way to make the image work with the message, and the font and the type treatment can help you there. Because if you try to exploit something that's happening, keep it readable, keep everything working together, but you can find ways to exploit the message that isn't there, and you can make it your message. And I think that's really interesting. In the case of that's right, my eyes are right up here. When you get to the end of that type, you go into her eyes. That's a nice design trick, and that's a pretty straightforward thing to do. I chose, however, a handwritten font. Now, the handwritten font, in my opinion, helps you to understand that this is something stated by her. And so handwritten message, is it from her? It kind of helps you to see it that way. And so when I say that's right, my eyes are right up here, I don't need to tell you that it's her, and that's her speaking to the viewer. So basically, I just wanted to give you these ideas to show you that font and type treatments essentially are flexible tools for you to use whether you want to persuade someone to read a specific word on your page, whether you want those words to mean something different than they would at first glance, whether you want those characters on the page to work with a shape or with an element or with a photo, and whether you want to use your typography to deliver a concept, not just a headline, or just to play with your viewers' expectations. So this was, again, not necessarily advanced typography in itself, but an advanced way of looking at typography. The next step for how do you use type within concept to deliver your ideas. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'm going to do another typography video soon, which will be a lot more sort of practical, me digging in and doing type and talking about some of the principles. But hopefully you understood this and this was cool. And thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.